Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're specifically going to talk about the interview, the podcast that was done between Jason Alexander and Peter Tilden, and unfortunately David Guggenheim, and John Peterson, right? And so John Peterson is a Dungeons and Dragons history expert. He's literally written books on Dungeons and Dragons. And Jason Alexander is George Costanza from Seinfeld, extremely famous, extremely rich, right? And then Peter Tilden is a for realsies American movie producer. He's produced American films, right? So all right. So basically, what was really fascinating was, so Jason Alexander and Peter Tilden do the NYT, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal thing where they waltz over and they get somebody who knows nothing about Dungeons and Dragons, literally thinks it's a board game, has done no research, and it's just like looking at a capybara in the zoo and is like, oh, what is this thing? You know, and then asks a bunch of inane questions that literally the Wikipedia page would have answered. And then, you know, they do their little muggle dance, like, I'm a D&D expert, let me try to explain this to you. And I do have sympathy here, and the reason why is Dungeons and Dragons is outrageously complex. It is, and actually, I'm sorry, I should apologize. You can't understand Dungeons and Dragons by reading the Wikipedia page. You'll have no idea what Dungeons and Dragons is by the time you're done with reading the Wikipedia page. So even if they had done basic research, they still would have been light years away from understanding Dungeons and Dragons. So I do have some sympathy for it, but I have very short patience for this because I endure it all the time. I really despise these muggle interviews, right? These people just kind of asking what D&D is. And I'm like, we've moved past this, man. Like, you know, D&D is a global intellectual property. And Jason Alexander's son literally is a dungeon master, and he still doesn't know what it is, right? Like, I'm like, whoa, okay. But they got to this really fascinating point. So they asked their muggle, they're like, hey, I heard somebody thought the game was satanic. Tell me about that. Ooh, titillating. Ooh, you know, so they're like getting all, hot and excited about Satanism, right? Like, you know, and so John Peterson goes in and he's like, okay, so game comes out in 1974. 1979, this kid at a very high prestigious college goes down into the steam tunnels and gets lost. And this gets connected to Dungeons and Dragons. Now later it was found out that Dungeons and Dragons was not the complete source of it, but Dungeons and Dragons. But this kicked off very real concerns from parents about their kids playing Dungeons and Dragons, and Dungeons and Dragons was whipping through every high school in the country, right? Like, and I would say eccentric genre participants, right? In the old days, they would have said nerd, but I say eccentric genre participants were getting extremely excited because they realized that Dungeons and Dragons was like nothing they had ever seen, like nothing they had ever seen, right? And so legitimately, parents are getting upset and scared, and every teen, like, who ever read Lord of the Rings is like frothing at the mouth to get every copy of every book they can, right? And it's exploding off the shelves, right? And so this is really fascinating. So John Peterson says, okay, so 1979 steam tunnels event kicks all this off, right? And then by 1983, there's a full-on satanic panic, right? And it literally, it's an American historical event, and you could read about it, right? There are literally multiple books written on it, right? And he said, and then John Peterson said something that I was absolutely fascinated by. Listen to what he said. He said, so George Costanza's like, I'm sorry, Jason Alexander, who plays George Costanza is like, so did it hurt the game, right? And John Peterson, this is the entire reason for this video. He said, it simultaneously demonized the game and made it immensely popular, right? So the thing is already flying off the shelves. It's already having massive success, right? But he was like, but you want to put the hot sauce on the taco, right? Tell people who are already struggling to get the books because it's so popular and it's flying off of every friendly local game shop. And actually, it wasn't even friendly local game shops. They were getting it all over. They were getting it literally shipped to their house through the mail. They were buying it at conventions. They were buying it at Star Trek conventions. Like this is the early days, right? And he's like, but if you want to put the hot sauce on the taco about something that's popping up, tell people you can't have it, right? Like, and so he said, it's simultaneously and he was referring to the Satanic Panic. It simultaneously made it demonize the game and made it immensely popular. And I love that we have a D&D history expert who's like, the Satanic Panic was the best thing, like, and this is me paraphrasing, Satanic Panic was the best thing that could have happened to Dungeons & Dragons, right? And I love that we've reached a point where we're real, you know, we're like people are like, oh, I had to live through the Satanic Panic. Dude, you're dining out on that story now, right? And the reality is, a lot of people wish they had been persecuted, because today nobody's getting persecuted for playing D&D. Nobody's getting persecuted for playing Dungeons & Dragons today, right? Now, they were in January of 2023, right? But the reality is, Dungeons & Dragons shocked the world. Dungeons & Dragons shocked the world, right? And what's really interesting is, so, okay, let's put all that on the shelf. I want to take it further, right? And what I want to just say is, this doesn't happen to OSE. This doesn't happen to Shadowdark. This doesn't happen to Pathfinder, right? And the reason why is, you can't even get people to play those games, let alone be upset about it, let alone to want to destroy it, let alone to get their church group to burn the books, right? You can't, and actually, you couldn't burn a Shadowdark book right now because you can't get a physical copy, really, because okay, Kelsey Dion, like, everybody knew it was going to sweep the Ennies, right? Like, it was like, the thing has been going, like, and so when she should have been getting the book printed, she was spending time building a solo Shadowdark, and how are you going to play the solo Shadowdark if you didn't show the solo Shadowdark? If you didn't take the time to print extra books, that would happen when you won and you actually literally swept the Ennies, right? Like, and the reason I say this is, like, people are like, oh, why can't people do things like the way indies do? Because indies are terrible, and they literally don't print enough books for OSR who want printed books. They don't want to play off of PDFs, right? Like, you can't write this stuff. If you wrote it as a script, people would be like, that's ridiculous, right? Like, you can't make this stuff up. Unbelievable. Okay, all right. John Peterson. And so the OSR, and so if you're going to be, and this is why you cannot beat Dungeons & Dragons. And I want you to understand, every time you try to ask someone, I want you to forget that shiny, beautiful book on the FLGS that you just saw, the 2024 Core Rulebook PHP. Yes, the one that had 6 people looking at it on day of release. I want you to forget that, right? And play this crusty Shadowdark book, which we couldn't print, right? And you're just going to look at it on your phone, right? Like, and so this is my point, right? And people don't understand this. The Satanic Panic still has power today, right? Because when you say, hey, Friday night, brand new 2024 core rulebook, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's the 6th edition of a book they tried to burn in the streets, man. Let me get that sweet, sweet success, right? Whereas when you're like saying, oh, hey, can you play OSR and Pathfinder and Shadowdark? People are like, you mean that game that nobody ever tried to destroy even once? Because I heard that there was a Satanic Panic in 1983, and then there was a Manic Panic in 2023. Not only did they try to burn the physical books in 1983, they tried to burn the digital books in 2023. And we're insisting that people destroy their digital collections, and that Religious zealots tried to destroy it in 1983, and anti-religious zealots tried to destroy it in 2023. But your game that you want me to play has no legacy, no momentum, no passion. It does not need to be protected because nobody wants it. Nobody's excited about it, and nobody is upset about it. It is forgettable in every possible way. All right? And this is why Dungeons and Dragons wins. And why it will, and this is also the gauntlet, right? You can't just copy Dungeons and Dragons and get people a little annoyed at your changes. You have to shock the culture to beat Dungeons and Dragons. And until OSR and indie creators realize that the bar is literally the shocking the entire culture in 2024, they will never win. And that's why nobody wants to sit at your crusty, dusty OSE Pathfinder Shadow Dark nonsense table. Because you never had a church who wanted to burn it, and you never had an atheist who wanted to burn it. Gary's legacy burns bright in every PHB, right? And the reality is, Kelsey Dion is a brilliant, brilliant designer who should be the lead design for Dungeons and Dragons, but who spent 6 months building a solo version of a book she desperately needed to be printing, right? This is the point. D&D cannot be beaten until people know what its actual shape is and the arena where the fight will actually happen, in my humble opinion. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic, please consider liking and subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.